There's a political strategist as well. Tell us, Theo, how important Keir Starmer is at the moment in all these discussions in regard to Ukraine, do you think?
The way forward in Ukraine is not to continue to give them a bucket load of money and let them waste it all and you know, just fire missiles at the Russians to no avail because the Russians have taken 20% of their land. The smart thing to do is to try and find some kind of peace.
In Ukraine, should it be deemed necessary, but of course they want that backstop, that security backstop from the United States. But in the wider picture of where we find ourselves right now, the Prime Minister's statement says it all. The ball is in Putin's court. He needs to decide to come to the table. And
we spoke a lot about Keir Starmer and his coalition of the willing. It looks as though the coalition of the willing has now gone down the gurgler because Donald Trump's just gone, well, I don't know what you people are talking about. We're not doing that. You've even admitted that you can't do anything without America. So why don't you do something with America?
Imagine being a prime minister with a legal background, only to be publicly told to mind your place by the country's top judge. That's exactly what happened to Keir Starmer when Baroness Carr issued a remarkable statement condemning his criticism of a court ruling on a Palestinian family seeking refuge. This isn't just political theater, it's a constitutional crisis in the making. Starmer, the former director of public prosecutions who built his career on defending legal principles, now stands accused of jeopardizing judicial independence to score political points on immigration. The question is, will this unprecedented judicial rebuke force a course correction, or is this the beginning of a dangerous new precedent? Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now, back to the video. So how did we arrive at this extraordinary moment? A former director of public prosecutions, now prime minister, being publicly rebuked by Britain's most senior judge. The seeds of this constitutional crisis were planted in a seemingly straightforward immigration case that has now ballooned into something far more dangerous. At the heart of this controversy lies the plight of a Palestinian family from Gaza.
And negotiate with primarily Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. So, yes, Keir Starmer is trying to cement his position amongst European leaders, but the real negotiations, the ones that really matter.
Quite what that collection of beanbag politicians from Europe thought they would achieve by getting together on Sunday is beyond me.
They all fancy a trip to London, I suspect.
Yeah, quite possibly. Yeah. But anybody with any semblance,
Moscow and Putin's team representing Russian interests.
Peter, where are we with this, do you think?
Yeah, I have to admit, I'm just going to echo what Theo said, that Starmer is positioning himself amongst European leaders, but in reality, what is he actually achieving? This coalition of the willing,
of grey matter between their ears, knows that this matter will only be resolved with some input from America.
Exactly.
Donald Trump.
And with America leading the way, frankly.
Whose home had been destroyed in the ongoing conflict. Desperate and with nowhere to turn, they sought refuge in the UK, where they had relatives ready to support them. With limited options available, they applied through the Ukraine family scheme, simply because it was the only online pathway they could access. This wasn't about gaming the system, it was about survival. When their case reached the courts, a British judge ruled they had the right to join their family in the UK under human rights law, specifically Article 8 regarding the right to family life. This wasn't judicial activism or overreach. It was a judge applying existing protections that Parliament itself had previously enshrined in law. The ruling made clear this was an exceptional case and wouldn't open floodgates or rewrite immigration rules. Yet Keir Starmer chose to turn this ruling into a political battleground. Standing in Parliament, the Prime Minister declared, "Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. I do not agree with the decision. She's right. It's the wrong decision." He went further, asserting that this is not what the scheme was designed to do. This decision is completely wrong. It cannot be allowed to stand. These weren't casual remarks. They were a direct challenge to judicial independence from the highest political office in the land. The irony here is striking. Starmer spent years as a human rights lawyer and later as director of public prosecutions, positions where he championed the very legal principles he now appears willing to sacrifice. This is a man who built his career on defending the rule of law, now seemingly undermining it for political convenience. The transformation from legal defender to judicial critic raises profound questions.
You know, a lot of people, a lot of these nations...
Well, there's quite a few members of it.
There's a few members, but what are they actually going to contribute? I mean, like, obviously Poland...
But they don't know what they'd be contributing for yet. We don't know about peacekeeping troops or yet or not.
We're all still very vague on the details, but everyone seems to be making the right noises.
Yes.
Right.
So it's all wishful thinking, grandstanding,
and virtue signalling.
Of course, of which so many of those European politicians got PhDs in virtue signalling.
Well, I said yesterday, 3 weeks ago, they'd never heard of a peace deal for Ukraine. Suddenly now they want one.
But with only France and ourselves willing to put boots on the ground, openly stating that, I mean, it's somewhat of a kick in the teeth for Starmer in terms of his actual ability to deliver on something. But I will say he's played this pretty well from a kind of PR perspective.
Exactly.
3 weeks ago.
Let's rewind a couple of months before Donald Trump had taken office for the second time. Nobody was speaking in terms of peace. No one, not a soul, not a politician,
not a sausage
anywhere.
Bugger all.
About his commitment to constitutional principles. Baroness Carr's response to Starmer's comments was nothing short of extraordinary. The UK's top judge didn't just disagree, she condemned his remarks as unacceptable and a direct breach of the responsibility politicians have to respect judicial independence. In taking the remarkable step of writing directly to the Prime Minister and using her annual press conference to issue a public warning, she signaled the gravity of this constitutional breach. This wasn't a minor disagreement, it was the judiciary drawing a line in the sand against political interference. But what motivated Starmer's attack on the courts? The answer appears nakedly political, by seizing on a procedural technicality and painting it as judicial activism helping Palestinians enter the country through legal loopholes. Starmer created a narrative that served his immediate political interests. He positioned himself as tough on immigration while deflecting blame for his government's own policies onto judges who were simply doing their job. What Starmer conveniently omitted was that the court's decision had nothing to do with the Ukraine scheme itself. It was based entirely on established human rights law, the same law that Parliament in its sovereign capacity had approved. The judge wasn't rewriting rules, she was upholding them as Parliament intended. The reality of the Gaza family's situation stands in stark contrast to Starmer's characterization. These weren't opportunists exploiting loopholes. They were survivors of war whose children had narrowly escaped death.
Looking like he's important, but let's be real, Donald Trump will just ignore him if necessary. He's somewhat of an irrelevancy to the grander scheme and the grander negotiations that are happening. I mean, one thing I do find very interesting is the rise of Saudi Arabia.
So Donald Trump has seized the initiative, has led, then so many people have got their knickers in a twist over three geezers having a fallout in a room.
Oh yeah, because he's a bit rude.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
To which, you know, these negotiations are happening. I think that's a really important aspect that a lot of people haven't really talked about. But I
mean, it's interesting that the Saudis.
Think of some of the meetings.
Some of these people have never been in meetings where you shout at each other.
Exactly.
Right.
Where you have differences of opinion and robust exchanging of views.
All right.
I've been in many of those.
Indeed.
Seeking a chance to live in safety with their family. They use the only pathway available to them, with no fraud or exploitation involved. Immigration experts and lawyers quickly clarified this fact, but Starmer's misleading narrative had already served its political purpose. What we're witnessing is a dangerous erosion of the separation of powers, a cornerstone principle that prevents any single branch of government from becoming too powerful. By publicly pressuring and criticizing judges for rulings he dislikes, Starmer sets a precedent where judicial decisions might be influenced by fear of political backlash rather than by law alone. What we're witnessing is democracy at a precarious crossroads. The question looming over Britain isn't merely about a single case or a momentary clash between branches of government. It's about whether we'll permit our legal system to become weaponized for political gain. When judicial independence erodes, public trust follows. Courts transform from guardians of justice into obstacles to be circumvented. The danger lies not just in Starmer's immediate actions, but in the precedent they establish. Will Parliament rise to defend the judiciary? Will the press sound the alarm? Will the British public recognize what's at stake? The future of the UK's legal system, and by extension its democracy, hangs in the balance.